Hello and welcome back to my playthrough of Fargo's Souls mod in Eternity mode. Once again, after defeating each boss, I'll be spinning a wheel to find out which class I use against the next boss. The end of part 1 saw me defeat the Eye of Cthulhu, so let's not waste any time and get into the next spin of the wheel. Jesus. Thank God that's over. Okay, so now that we've defeated the Eye of Cthulhu, it's time to see what class I get for the next boss. I will say that I did just spin this without recording, so I kind of ignore the result of that. But it looks like we're getting the same result anyway, so it doesn't actually matter. So let's see how summoning goes. There aren't many summoning weapons added by Fargo's, so I started by crafting the Snapthorn and Finch staff, then decided to test out the Kamikaze Squirrel staff, dropped by the Trojan Squirrel. With this, you can spawn multiple squirrels which don't take up minion slots. They also don't damage by contact or projectiles. Instead, you can right-click the staff to make all squirrels explode, dealing damage to nearby enemies. I wasn't really sure how powerful any of these weapons would be, so I decided to just spawn the Eater of Worlds to see how much damage they did. The results were disheartening to say the least, and sent me straight back to the drawing board. I thought my best option would be the slime staff, as it could pierce through multiple segments. I knew there was a recipe to make it using the King Slime trophy. However, I doubted my ability to beat King Slime with my current gear, so decided instead that I would go to the snow biome to farm for a flick staff. After this, I began the long and arduous task of farming King Slime for a trophy. Throughout this process, I found myself getting better at using the Kamikaze Squirrel staff, and discovered it was quite good at dealing damage to multiple enemies at once. There's just one thing I need to do before my rematch against the Eater of Worlds, and that is crafting the Silver enchantment. This is truly an invaluable accessory for summoners, giving minions a massive speed boost along with armor penetration, and spawning a silver sword to attack alongside you. With this, I spawned the Eater of Worlds, and accidentally took out half of its health before the fight had even started. The fight itself isn't too hard by Eternity mode standards, with only two noticeable new attacks. The first is a collection of cursed flame fireballs that are shot at the player. The second new attack consists of the smaller worms burrowing into the ground to perform a synchronized leap upwards, followed by them turning around to return to the ground. Due to the accidental melting at the start, I end up winning this fight quite easily. However, it felt a little too much like I'd cheesed it, so decided to spawn it again before I can use any of its drops. On the second fight, I decided to use the Kamikaze Squirrel staff instead of the Snapthorn, finding its area of effect damage quite good at dealing with multiple segments. Unfortunately, I end up dying just before the end. However, because it was so close, I decided to count the two combined fights as an acceptable win, and allowed myself to use the drops from the first fight. So since I was so close on the second attempt, I'm just going to count that as a win, and going to see what class I get for the next boss. Looking like we're going back to magic for this one. Pretty much the only upgrades I can get for magic at this point are from meteorite. So I slowly mine out the whole crater while periodically dealing with meteor heads. I then use the ore I gathered to craft a meteor set and a space gun. As this combination doesn't use mana, I'm left with an open accessory slot from the magic cuffs that I don't need anymore. I decide to fill this with the copper enchantment, which occasionally shoots out bolts of lightning on enemy hits. The damage of these bolts scale with magic damage, so this can somewhat be considered a mage accessory. This proves incredibly powerful against the first phase of the Brain of Cthulhu, with the lightning bolts managing to take out many of the creepers. During this phase, the creepers shoot out a barrage of ichor projectiles which spiral towards the player. Unfortunately, I don't last long during the second phase, with the brain inflicting many debuffs including confusion. It takes quite a few attempts to get used to this, with me finally discovering that the boss inflicts confusion on a timer, using a boss roar as a telegraph. After finding this out, the boss became much easier, although the final stage was still very hectic. So now with the Brain of Cthulhu down, it's time to spin again and see what I'm going to go with for the next boss. Kind of open melee because I haven't used it yet, but it's looking like it's going to be summoning again. Okay. I was actually quite happy to get summoning, as both the Eater of Worlds and the Brain of Cthulhu had dropped summon weapons. I paired these with the Snapthorn I'd made earlier, and then crafted some obsidian armour for extra damage. After this, I travel to the jungle and make some basic housing so that I can get a jungle pylon. I then make the mistake of spawning Queen Bee on the surface. You may have noticed that the evil bosses didn't enrage when outside of their biome, and I thought this would be the same for the Queen Bee. However, she still enrages on the surface, so I had to change my plan and go to the jungle to make an underground arena. The City Buster added by Fargo's Mutant mod made this a breeze, clearing tiles in a massive area. With a few rows of platforms placed, my preparation was complete, and I spawned the Queen Bee once again to face my wrath. The first phase of the fight is not too dissimilar from vanilla, with the only exception being that the Queen Bee will occasionally stop and fire a spread of stinger projectiles in a circle. The next addition is that at certain levels of health, the Queen Bee will spawn royal subjects to defend her. These act as miniature Queen Bees, using her ramming attack and giving her a defense boost until they're defeated. Another new attack is telegraphed when the Queen Bee roars and hovers in one position. This is your warning to get directly above or below her, or you'll soon be consumed by a sea of bees. Not much changes for the rest of the fight, other than the Queen Bee increasing the speed at which she attacks. I chip away at her health and eventually defeat her, meaning it's time to go back to the picker wheel to choose my next class. However, if you want to see that, you'll need to tune into the next episode. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it, and if you enjoyed this video then leave a like. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.